Hi, and thank you for joining me for another short lecture. And today I'm going to confront an area that, if incorrectly understood, could slowly but surely destroy the whole purpose of the Jewish experiment. And friends, I know I say this a lot on how important a given lecture may be, and it's not that I'm overemphasizing or exaggerating the value of these issues, but rather that there is just so much in Torah Judaism that, if misunderstood, could completely socially knock ethical progress off its intended axis. And friends, the same holds true with today's topics, which are Yeridat Hadarot, or how Ashkenazim say it, Yeridas Hadarot, and Daas Torah. Now let's quickly begin with Yeridat Hadarot, which literally means the decline of the generations, or the generational decline. Now this is the belief that since Har Sinai, Jewish humanity has been on a decline, not just mentally and ethically, but spiritually as well. A decline, as it is taught today, that it's unpreventable. In other words, people who believe in this, as a rule, also believe that someone from a later generation could never surpass someone from a previous one, either in Torah, halacha, or in spiritual matters. And not because of circumstance, but because of some sort of principle. And friends, it was this idea of Yeridat Hadarot, the generational decline, that then gave birth to the notion we have today of Daas Torah. The idea that although we are in this uncontrollable, unpreventable decline, there exists a handful of men within our generation that can still guide us to the Geula. How? Because these men have what they call Daas Torah, a gift, as they teach, that is only transferred from one Adam Gadol to another. Something that only someone completely immersed in Torah, i.e. doesn't work, can attain. Which is what? Which is basically, in their opinion, the voice of God in our generation. But anyways, friends, this notion of Yeridat Hadarot really culminated in the creation of the Adam Gadol, the individuals we call Gedolim nowadays, the great ones, literally, who then claim to wield their power with the invention of Daas Torah. So just as in the recreation of Smicha in the 1500s, which gave them the opportunity to wield rabbinic authority in their minds by claiming to have the authority of the men of the Sanhedrin, the creation of Daas Torah and the role of Gedolim gave them the opportunity to wield the authority of Moses. So, what is Daas Torah? Well, Daas Torah, like we said, is not a term that appears anywhere in rabbinic literature. Actually, the term Daas Torah, the notion Daas Torah, was invented in 1917 by Agudas Israel as a way to wean power over the Jewish masses. So this neo-doctrine of Daas Torah teaches that the revered rabbis of our generation, i.e. the Gedolim, have a special connection to the rabbis of old, like an unbroken chain of insight that is transferred from teacher to student. And this, they claim, goes all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Again, this concept appears nowhere in the Torah, nowhere in Shas, and not even the Rishonim mention it. Now, Smicha, like we said earlier, we know did pass down from Moshe Rabbeinu down to the last of the Tanaim, but Daas Torah is a new invention. Also, Smicha only gave the power to a shofet, to a judge, on halachic issues, unlike Daas Torah, which supposedly gives them the power to make infallible decisions on every given issue of life, and every Jew must obey. Actually, Gedolim themselves are sometimes even called Daas Torah. Actually, a Gadol is actually referred to nowadays as a Sefer Torah Chai, a walking Torah scroll. Yes, my friends, it's gotten this ridiculous. They also teach that Daas Torah can only be embodied by someone who is completely immersed in Torah, which, in their opinion, is only someone who refuses to work and, i.e., earn a living for themselves, and only learns Torah all day. A practice that every one of these supposed Gedolim claims is the destiny of every Jew, which is why nowadays you see the ridiculous, baseless practice of Jewish men, like we said, learning all day and sending their wives to work to support them. When throughout Jewish history, every Jewish scholar had a profession, right? The Rambam was a doctor, Rashi ran a vineyard. But again, because of Yeridat Hadarot, the Gedolim decided that today every Jew must learn full-time, a practice that was only invented really in the 1960s by Rav Aaron Kotler in the US and reinforced later by Rav Shach in Eretz Yisrael. Now, you must know that these ideas of Yeridat Hadarot, Gedolim, and ultimately of Das Torah really only arose with the invention of Orthodox Judaism. In other words, one of the worst things that could have arisen in the Jewish world was the classification of Torah-keeping Jews as Orthodox, mainly by the Reform, which then categorized them as some sort of minority group, i.e. the Orthodox, because the Reform is a much bigger movement than Orthodoxy nowadays. And thus, being a minority group, there arose leaders who felt that we needed them instructing us in every area of life, i.e. the Gedolim. So this was really just a Litvish phenomenon, mainly because Hasidim had been living in such a fashion for centuries, before the Lithuanian German form of Judaism, what we refer today as Orthodoxy, was born. And the big question is, friends, where is the source? Now, one quick source they'll typically toss out is the whole statement of Emunat Chachamim, of Emunas Chachamim, which appears in some versions of Pirkei Avos in the later added 6th chapter. So they use this to in some way justify Das Torah. And really, friends, I don't know how someone could use such a completely ambiguous phrase like Emunat Chachamim, faith in our wise men, to justify the human veneration that has taken place with the concept of Das Torah today. Or worse, they'll tie it into the mitzvah of Lo Tasur, as it states in Parshat Shoftim, in Deuteronomy 17, that we should not stray from the rulings of the court, which the Rambam and the Ramban and virtually all poskim here state that this only refers to the Beit Din HaGadol, to the Sanhedrin, to the great Sanhedrin, and not to rabbis of today. And regarding even our sages of the Sanhedrin, Chazal, no one ever made the assumption that they never made mistakes or gave erroneous rulings, like they do with the Gedolim who supposedly have Das Torah today. Because if this is the case, that why do we have Masechet Torayot or Chilchot Shegagot that clearly explain to us not only that Chazal did make mistakes in the past, but what was to be done when those mistakes were made? But we're supposed to believe that the decisions of the Gedolim today are infallible, or how they perverted the term tzaddik, which they apply to any of these Gedolim, to mean someone who never sins, apart from the traditional understanding of the term, which, as brought down by the Rambam and others, which only meant someone whose good deeds outweigh his bad deeds. Actually, did you know, friends, how many Jews didn't leave Europe during World War II after they saw the writing on the wall because the supposed local Gedolim, under the guise of Das Torah, compelled them to stay? Or how many Gedolim were for the evacuation of Gush Katif, right? By evacuating the yeshivas and the Jews, only to see it turn into the terrorist enclave it's become today? Or how many have made ridiculous pronouncements like making it forbidden to spank your child or to vote for a certain candidate? And friends, the list of ridiculous pronouncements goes on and on. And the funny thing is that if you ask your average rabbi about Das Torah, he will support it. He will stand up for it. In other words, he will go out of his way to justify it. Now, friends, if we know that the term was never heard of before 1917, why does anyone feel that they have to justify it today? I mean, instead of just saying, hey, if it was made up 100 years ago, why do we need to justify it or explain it? Unless they have completely forfeited their opinions for the opinions of the Gedolim themselves, which would basically make everything they say questionable. So friends, Yeridat Hadarot is a myth. In other words, in life, no matter what area, you are only limited by your lack of effort, and that's it. And regarding Das Torah, the only instructions we're required to obey are those brought down by Moses and the members of the Great Sanhedrin, who we so reverently refer to as Chazal. And anything outside of this is considered only opinion. Friends, for more information about everything Jewish, please visit TorahJudaism.org. And if you're interested in converting to Judaism, which I encourage you to do, also visit TorahJudaism.org. Thank you.